There is a sound a Ferrari makes when everything is wrong with it. Not a bang or a screech, nothing so obvious as that. It is subtler, a barely perceptible disharmony beneath the thunder of the engine. The way a wrong note sounds in an orchestra, not because it is loud, but because it does not belong. Most people would never hear it. Most people would never know to listen for it. Miguel Reyes heard it from the sidewalk, above the street noise of a Tuesday afternoon in Los Angeles, above the grinders and the traffic and the barking of a dog across the street, and he stood still for a moment on the pavement outside his shop and let the sound settle in his mind like a note he needed to remember. It would take 3 more weeks and 2 acts of spectacular arrogance before the man who owned that Ferrari would understand what Miguel had already known. The garage that Miguel operated from was not the kind of place that made people comfortable unless they knew what they were looking at. The floor was concrete stained with decades of oil. The fluorescent lights had a flicker that guests attributed to old wiring, and the tools on the pegboards were second-hand, arranged with a precision so careful it bordered on the obsessive. A hand-painted sign above the bay door read Miguel's Auto Solutions. The parking lot was chain link and cracked asphalt. He had rented the space for the first time at 22 years old with a coffee can of savings he had been adding to for 4 years, folded bills from double shifts at the dishwasher and the convenience store, and the weekend mechanic's helper job. From every hour he had given to work instead of rest or pleasure. He had stood in the empty garage on that first morning and felt the weight of it. Everything he had wanted since he was 8 years old in San Miguel, outside Guadalajara, pressing his small hand against the vibrating side of his father's engine and telling his father exactly what was wrong before any adult in the room had found the problem. Eduardo Reyes owned a small repair shop. He worked on farm equipment and the occasional vehicle that wandered down their dusty road, and from the time Miguel was old enough to be useful, he was useful. He had a gift that showed itself early and unmistakably, the ability to hear an engine the way a doctor hears a body. Not simply to detect that something was wrong, but to locate it precisely, to feel through sound and vibration the source of the disharmony the way you might feel a splinter under skin before you can see it. His grandfather Roberto had been a mechanic for racing teams in his youth, before settling in San Miguel and becoming ordinary in the way that extraordinary people sometimes choose to become ordinary when the world they wanted grows too far away. Roberto recognized in his grandson what he had once recognized in himself, except that in Miguel it was larger, more complete, something that deserved more room than San Miguel could provide. While other children played in the streets, Miguel sat with his grandfather and absorbed. Complex theories of combustion and thermal dynamics and mechanical resonance delivered not as lectures but as conversations, the kind of knowledge that settles into a person differently than classroom learning, that becomes part of how they understand the world, rather than simply something they know. An engine is like a symphony, Roberto told him. Each part must play in harmony with the others. When you hear a problem, you're hearing a musician out of tune. By 15, Miguel could rebuild engines blindfolded. By 17, farmers from neighboring towns requested the boy with the golden ears specifically. By 19, with barely $500 and a duffel bag, he crossed the border and took a bus to Los Angeles, where a distant cousin lived, and the life he had planned for himself began its long and difficult attempt to become real. The first 3 years were hard in the way that honest work in a new country is hard, which is to say, completely. He washed dishes in the mornings, and clerked at a convenience store in the evenings, and helped at a mechanic's shop on weekends. Every spare dollar went into the coffee can. Every spare hour went into English and into engineering textbooks borrowed from the public library, their spines worn soft from the hands of other people who had needed them. When he finally had enough to open the shop, he poured himself into it entirely. Word traveled the way good work always travels, by mouth and by necessity. Taxi drivers and delivery truck operators and families with aging cars that dealerships had given up on as not worth the time. They found their way to Miguel's Auto Solutions and left with vehicles that ran the way they had not run in years. His prices were fair. His diagnostics were almost supernatural. He had developed his own testing methods based on sound and vibration patterns that he cross-referenced with digital data. Where other mechanics read computer outputs and stopped, Miguel read the computer and then listened to the machine beneath it, because machines had not changed as much as software had, and the truth of what was wrong with them was still mostly mechanical and still mostly something you could hear if you knew the language. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the Ferrari California drove past. Miguel heard it from the sidewalk and went still. The disharmony was small, barely perceptible, buried under the impressive authority of the engine, but it was there, an unresolved note in what should have been a perfect chord. He stood with it for a moment. Then he went back to work and let it sit in his mind. Richard Harmon had built his fortune through a series of tech startup acquisitions and had spent the past 15 years accumulating the kind of life that money assembles for people who believe life is a collection rather than an experience. A mansion in the hills, a private jet membership, a collection of exotic cars that served primarily as evidence of what he had achieved. The Ferrari F8 Tributo was the prize of the collection. $300,000 of Italian engineering kept mostly in a climate-controlled garage and brought out for the specific purpose of being seen. When it developed an engine problem, he was annoyed rather than worried. That was what warranties and service plans were for. Beverly Hills Exotic Motors assured him, with the particular confidence of an establishment that charges enough money that confidence is part of the service, that their factory-trained technicians would have the F8 running perfectly within the week. They gave him the keys to a courtesy Maserati. Richard left the Ferrari and did not think about it again until it was returned, and then it developed the same problem within 3 days. This happened 3 more times over the course of a month. Each visit produced new invoices, replaced sensors, recalibrated systems, diagnostic reports dense, with technical language that added up to no one understanding what was wrong. The bills were covered under warranty. But Richard's patience was structural and had a limit. It was at a gas station near Brentwood that things changed. Richard had the Ferrari that week, convinced that the most recent service had resolved the issue. He was standing outside the car with his phone pressed to his ear in the middle of a business call when Miguel's work truck pulled in. Miguel had just delivered a repaired Mercedes to a client. He got out to fuel up and heard the Ferrari idling. Even over the pump noise, even distracted by the drive, he heard it. The disharmony he had caught on the sidewalk 3 weeks before, still there, still unresolved, slightly worse. When Richard ended his call, Miguel approached. He was respectful and direct. "Excuse me, sir. I couldn't help but notice your Ferrari has a harmonic imbalance in the intake resonance chamber. It's causing incomplete combustion in cylinders 3 and 6. Richard looked at him the way people look at someone who has wandered into a space they were not meant to occupy. He took in the worn work clothes, the accent, the painted name on the old pickup truck. "Is that so?" he said. "And I suppose you learned that at Ferrari University." 2 mechanics from the dealership happened to be in the lot picking up another client's vehicle. They came over. "Everything all right, Mr. Harmon?" one asked, looking at Miguel with the practiced suspicion of people protecting their territory. Richard gestured at Miguel. "I'm getting a free diagnosis from this gentleman here." Miguel introduced himself. He extended his hand. Richard looked at it and did not take it. The taller mechanic snorted. These street mechanics always think they know better. Watch a few videos online and suddenly they're experts. "My shop is in East LA, Miguel said calmly. "If you'd like a second opinion on your vehicle, I believe I could help. You think I'm going to let someone who works out of an East LA garage touch my $300,000 Ferrari?" Richard laughed. The dealership mechanics laughed. The service manager, who had now appeared from somewhere, joined in on the general amusement. Miguel placed his business card on the Ferrari's windshield and walked away. Another 4 weeks passed. The problem worsened. Beverly Hills Exotic Motors now suggested a complete engine replacement, $85,000. 3 months waiting for a new engine from Italy. Richard had investors flying in within the week, and he needed the car operational. He stared at his phone in his assistant Jennifer's office and felt the specific frustration of a man who is very used to being able to buy his way out of problems. Jennifer hesitated, then placed a small card on the desk in front of him. She had found it on the windshield when she was retrieving his sunglasses from the car weeks ago. She had kept it, meaning to throw it away. Something had stopped her, Miguel's auto solutions. Richard stared at it. He weighed desperation against pride and made the call. The workshop was exactly as different from Beverly Hills' exotic motors as you would expect. No espresso machine, no Italian leather couches, no flat screens showing Formula One highlights, concrete floors, flickering lights, the smell of oil and metal and work. Richard stood in his tailored suit and felt genuinely uncomfortable. The particular discomfort of a person who has arranged their entire life to avoid places like this one. Miguel approached the Ferrari with an attention that surprised Richard. He did not immediately open the hood or ask for the keys. He walked around the car slowly, pausing occasionally, listening with his eyes half closed, his head tilted at a slight angle, as if the car were speaking to him in a register no one else could hear. "I'll need to keep it for 2 days," Miguel said. "The Ferrari dealership has had it for weeks," Richard said. "What makes you think you can fix it in 2 days?" Miguel vet his eyes steadily. "Because I've heard this problem before. In different engines. The principles are the same." Against his judgment, Richard left the keys. He made the expected threat about the cost of the car, and Miguel absorbed it the way he absorbed most things directed at him by men who believed their money entitled them to a particular kind of deference. "I understand what this machine represents," Miguel said simply. "I'll treat it with the respect it deserves." Once alone with the car, Miguel began. He brought out his grandfather's stethoscope, the one Roberto had given him before he left San Miguel, and he placed it against different parts of the engine with the methodical attention of a diagnostician. He made hand-drawn diagrams of sound wave patterns, correlating them with RPM ranges. He worked through what the digital diagnostics had revealed and then passed it, listening for what the software was not programmed to detect. He found it. A subtle harmonic vibration occurring specifically when certain components reached particular temperatures, not electrical, not digital, purely mechanical. A resonance issue the Ferrari's sensors had never been designed to identify. Miguel worked through the night, sleeping 2 hours on the cot he kept in the back. By morning he had a theory. By afternoon he had a solution built from mathematical principles his grandfather had first explained to him in terms of farm equipment and irrigation pumps, principles that applied as readily to a $300,000 Italian supercar as to anything else because mechanical truth, as Roberto had always said, did not care about price tags. He fabricated what he needed from basic materials, adapting tools for purposes they were not designed for, making adjustments by hand that required the touch sensitivity of a safe cracker and the patience of a watchmaker. At 3 in the morning of the second day, Miguel made a final adjustment and started the engine. The sound that filled the workshop was different, pure, harmonious, complete, not merely fixed but better than it had been when it left the factory, because Miguel had not simply repaired the problem. He had understood it well enough to optimize what surrounded it. He called Richard at dawn. "Your car is ready." Richard arrived, still skeptical, still failing to quite conceal his expectation of disappointment. He started the engine. His expression changed. Even to his completely untrained ear, something was unmistakably different. The car did not sound fixed. It sounded transformed. The power delivery was smoother. The engine more responsive. Every quality that had made him want the car in the first place was suddenly more present, more itself. After a brief drive around the block, Richard returned. His reluctant amazement was almost physical. "What did you do?" Miguel explained in terms accessible to someone who understood engines only as expensive things that should work correctly. Richard nodded through roughly 10% comprehension and 100% of the results. When Miguel presented the bill, which was a fraction of what the dealership had been charging for temporary solutions, Richard frowned. "This seems low for what you've accomplished." "It's my standard rate," Miguel replied. "The complexity of the problem doesn't change the dignity of the work." As they completed the transaction, Richard's phone rang. His face changed as he listened. His investors had arrived early. A traffic accident had closed Wilshire. The meeting he had been preparing for weeks was in danger of starting without him. "There's a canyon route," Miguel said, "winding but clear of traffic. I just got the car fixed. I don't want to push it. She'll perform better than ever." The repair didn't just fix the problem. It optimized the system. With no better option, Richard agreed. The Ferrari moved through the canyon roads with a precision that made Richard feel, for the first time, what the car was actually capable of. Every turn, every acceleration, every application of the brakes felt perfectly calibrated, the car and the road in a conversation so fluent it approached something like beauty. By the time they reached the downtown financial district, Richard was grinning in a way that had nothing to do with business. They pulled up in front of the building just as a group of executives stepped out of a limousine. One of them, a distinguished Italian man in his 50s, turned at the sound of the Ferrari's engine, his head tilted. His eyes went to the car with the particular attention of someone who knows exactly what they are hearing. "Richard," the man said, approaching. "Is this your F8 Tributo?" He circled the car slowly. "Something sounds different than standard. The harmonic profile is extraordinary." The man was Matteo Bianchi, Ferrari's chief technical officer, in Los Angeles for a technology conference. As he continued to examine the car, his casual interest became something else, something more focused and alert. "Who worked on this engine?" Richard hesitated. Then he gestured at Miguel. "This is Miguel Reyes. He has a shop in East LA. He solved a problem our dealership couldn't fix in a month." Matteo studied Miguel with the particular assessment of a man who has spent his career learning to read other people's relationship with machines. "What exactly did you do, Mr. Reyes?" Miguel explained. Not in simplified terms this time, but in precise technical detail, occasionally sketching diagrams on the back of a business card to illustrate complex points. As he spoke, Matteo's polite interest transformed into something that was not polite at all, something focused and urgent and entirely genuine. "This is extraordinary," Matteo said finally. He turned to Richard. "Your mechanic has intuitively solved a resonance problem our engineering team in Maranello has been working on for the next generation engine." He pulled out his phone. "I need to get our head of engineering on a video call." Immediately, Richard looked from Matteo to Miguel and suddenly understood that he was watching something momentous occur in a parking lot. "We can use the conference room upstairs," he said. "The investors can wait." Within 30 minutes, Miguel was standing at a whiteboard, explaining his solution to a room full of Ferrari engineers, appearing on a large screen, while Richard and Matteo watched in person. He drew. He described the harmonic principles in the language his grandfather had given him. He showed how the same truth that governed a tractor engine in rural Mexico governed a supercar built in one of the most sophisticated facilities on Earth. The Italian engineers went quiet. Then the head engineer spoke. "Mr. Reyes has identified a fundamental flaw in our current resonance dampening approach. His solution could improve efficiency across our entire line." Matteo turned to Miguel. "Where did you study engineering?" "I didn't, officially. My grandfather was a race car mechanic in Mexico. He taught me the basics. Everything else came from books and from listening." The room went quiet again. A different kind of silence this time. The kind that means people are recalibrating something important. The dealership service manager arrived then, having been invited by Richard to discuss another vehicle matter. He froze in the doorway when he saw Miguel. Recognition crossed his face, followed immediately by alarm. "Mr. Peterson," Richard said, with the particular coolness of someone who has been waiting to say a thing, "I believe you've met Mr. Reyes. Ferrari's engineering team is quite impressed with his solution to my engine problem." "There must be some mistake," Peterson said. "Your factory-trained technicians failed to identify a basic resonance issue." Matteo interrupted. "Mr. Reyes not only diagnosed the problem correctly but developed an elegant solution that our own engineers are calling brilliant." The color left Peterson's face slowly and did not return. The investment meeting went ahead, the Italian investors equally impressed by the Ferrari's performance and the story behind its repair. The deal was signed for twice what Richard had hoped. That evening, word began moving through exclusive automotive circles. A video from the conference room, recorded by one of the engineers, reached industry insiders before midnight. "Street Mechanic Solves Ferrari's Unsolvable Problem" became the headline on automotive blogs by morning. 3 days later, Matteo returned to Miguel's shop with an official letter from Ferrari's headquarters in Maranello, an invitation to visit as a guest of the engineering department. A discussion of a formal consulting arrangement, a number in the letter, that represented more money than Miguel had made in the previous 5 years combined. Miguel stood in his garage with the letter trembling slightly in his hands. "We're prepared to offer you a position as a special consultant," Matteo said. 6 figures. Relocation to Italy, if you wish. Before Miguel could respond, his phone began ringing. Richard's wealthy friends had already heard. Beverly Hills Exotic Motors called with a job offer at double his current income. Former mockers claimed, as former mockers always do, that they had always seen his potential. In the midst of this, Miguel made a decision that surprised everyone except those who actually knew him. He declined Ferrari's relocation offer. He accepted instead a part-time consulting arrangement that would allow him to remain in East Los Angeles. "My community needs me here," he explained to a puzzled Matteo. "But I'm honored to work with Ferrari to implement these solutions." With his first consulting payment, Miguel did not buy a luxury car or move to a better neighborhood. He renovated the shop. He expanded it to include a training space. He established an apprenticeship program for disadvantaged youth interested in automotive work, focusing on students who, like himself, had talent and no formal pathway to use it. Richard came to apologize and came with an offer. He wanted to invest in the training program and establish a scholarship fund for immigrant engineering students. Miguel accepted both. "Success isn't about recognition from others," he told Richard. "It's about being true to your craft and helping where you can." The most surprising visitor was Peterson, demoted after the incident and eventually let go. He arrived at Miguel's shop one afternoon, standing in the doorway the way people stand when they are not sure they will be let in. "I was wrong about you," he said. "I've been in this industry 20 years, and I've forgotten how to actually listen to engines instead of just reading computer outputs." Miguel offered him a position. Not as a manager. As someone who could relearn the fundamentals while sharing his knowledge of luxury vehicles with the apprentices. "Engines don't care where you're from or what you look like," Miguel told his growing team. "They respond to understanding and respect." 6 months later, Ferrari announced that Miguel's method of harmonic balancing would be implemented in their next generation of engines, with his name credited in the official press release. Engineering textbooks began, including his diagnostic approach as a case study. He established a technical school in his hometown of San Miguel, returning twice a year to teach. The school became known for producing exceptional mechanical talent, with graduates recruited by automotive companies worldwide. On a warm evening in his expanded but still unpretentious garage, Miguel stood beside a 16-year-old apprentice, listening together to the engine of a vintage Mustang. The boy was from the same kind of struggling family Miguel had come from. He had the same gift, the same intuitive connection to the language machines, spoke to those who were patient enough to listen. "Close your eyes," Miguel said. "Tell me what you hear." The boy described the subtle irregularity in the timing with the careful concentration of someone discovering that they already know something they did not know they knew. Miguel smiled. "True genius isn't measured by where you work," he said quietly. "It's measured by how you see the world when everyone else has stopped looking. Have you ever been underestimated only to prove everyone wrong? Your value is not determined by other people's perception of you. It is determined by the passion and the excellence you bring to everything you do. True talent cannot stay hidden forever, and sometimes the people who dismissed you today will be learning from you tomorrow. The world needs what only you can offer, especially when no one else can see it yet."